Diana from So Very Crafty, and today we are here to make this super simple 6-pocket tote. And it's got 6 pockets because of the way it's sewn. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pockets, 2 straps, and way to go. This is a super simple handbag making project that anybody with beginner sewing skills can make. It is probably the simplest handbag project that you can make. It doesn't require any hardware. It is just fabric and a little bit of interfacing. It is a super simple project, I assure you, and it doesn't take very long to make either. So, I hope you enjoy this project today. It is a fun one, and this is a great little tote to carry around, to have all of your stuff in that you need to carry every day. And if you like this project, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, ding that bell for notifications so that you can get future So Very Crafty videos, and head over to www.soverycrafty.com and get more sewing and crafting tutorials that you don't get here on the YouTube channel. So let's get started on how we are going to make this particular 6-pocket, all fabric, no hardware tote. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to cut out some fabrics. And I've already done that for you, and I'll put the measurements of these fabrics in the description section of the video, just below where it says see more. But what you will need is 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm using 3 different colors of fabric for my tote, but you can use 4 different fabrics if you like, or all the same. It's really up to you. So for my handles, I'm using this blue fabric, and what I've done is I've cut 2 pieces that are 4 inches wide times the width of my fabric, or WOF. And the width of my fabric is just how wide it is when it's completely opened up. So I have 2 pieces that measure 4 inches times the width of my fabric. I have some outer pieces that measure 17 inches by 15.5 inches. That's 17 inches by 15.5 inches wide. And I also have some lining fabric that measures exactly the same amount, 17 inches by 15.5 inches. Then I have some interfacing. I have 2 pieces that measure 17.5 inches, or 17 inches by 15.5 inches. And then I have some fabrics that I've cut out for my pocket pieces. Now, ordinarily, I would cut out 4 pieces of this flower fabric for my pockets. But I didn't have enough fabric for this video, so I just made some blue for the inside of my pocket pieces. So what you're going to need is 4 pocket pieces that measure 15.5 inches wide by 13 inches tall. That's 15.5 inches wide by 13 inches tall. And you're going to need 2 pieces of interfacing that measure the same. Now, as far as the interfacing goes, in the prototype bag that I made, I used fusible fleece, and I really prefer the fusible fleece for this project, and I used Pellon 987F for my prototype bag that I'll be using myself to carry around because I use this really awesome Starry Night fabric that I found online. But I didn't have enough for the video, so I'm using some Pellon 809, which is the same as Pellon 808 but doubled up. So either of these interfacings will work for this project, but I really prefer the Fleece, the 987F, but it's completely up to you what you want to do. So the first thing that we are going to do for our project is we are going to make our handles. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to open up our two pieces of fabric and we are going to go over to the iron and we are going to press our fabric in half just like this, the long way. Once we have pressed our fabric the long way, we're going to open it up and then we are going to fold in the raw edges until they meet the center mark that you've just made with your iron. And you're going to press again so that these raw edges meet. And you're going to give that a nice press so it's nice and stiff. Then you are going to fold this piece in half again so that those raw edges are enclosed, and you're going to press again. And once you've done that, you're going to head over to the sewing machine and then you are going to stitch all along both of these edges using about a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm not going to show you on the video how to make these handles because these are standard handbag handles that you can make at any time, but they are super simple. Like I said, just fold in half, press, open up, fold the raw edges to the center, press, fold in half again, and top stitch along both sides. So I'm going to go to the iron and to the sewing machine and I'm going to take care of that, and I'll come back and we'll move on to our next step. Okay, now we have completed our two handles for our bag, and we're going to set those aside for a few minutes and move on to our next step. And our next step is that we are going to fuse our interfacing to our bag pieces. Now we can set aside the lining, but for now we are going to fuse the interfacing to the outer bag pieces and to the outer pocket pieces. In my case, it's going to be the piece with the flowers. Now, normally both of your pocket pieces would have flowers on them, but I didn't have enough flower fabric, so I'm using blue. But we are going to go over to the iron and we are going to fuse this interfacing according to the manufacturer's instructions so that this fuses onto the wrong side of our outer fabric pieces and our pocket pieces, so that they become one and we can treat them as one. And it gives this fabric a little bit of structure so that we can use it more strongly as we're using our bag day to day. So I'm just going to head over to the iron right now, and I'm going to fuse these pieces of interfacing to our bag pieces and to our pocket pieces, and then I'm going to come back and we are going to move on to our next step. Here we are, and we have fused our interfacing to the wrong sides of our fabric pieces. Now we are going to create our pockets. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take the other pocket pieces, we're going to place them right sides together with the flowered pocket pieces, and we're simply going to stitch one line right across the top using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm not going to show this on the video because it's just a straight stitch right across the top, and I will come back and we'll move on to our next step. Okay, I have completed my pocket pieces, and what I did was I flipped the pocket pieces right sides out and I top stitched along the top just with a straight line. And that's all there is to creating these pocket pieces. Now we are going to add our pocket pieces to our main outer bag. And the way we're going to do that is we are simply going to place them on top of our main outer bag so that the bottom raw edges meet. And I'm just going to use some wonder clips here. You could use pins if you like, but I like these wonder clips. I'll put a link to where to purchase these wonder clips in the discussion section if you want to get some. And I'm going to do the same thing over here on the other piece. And that's really all we need to do for that. But the next thing we're going to do is we are going to take our handles that we had set aside from before, and we are going to add those. We're going to take a ruler and we're going to measure in about 4.5 inches and place our first bottom part of our strap. And we're going to again either use a pin or a wonder clip, which I'm using here. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We are just going to measure in about 4.5 inches. And place the other side of this strap. Now we want to make sure that our strap is not crooked, which we're fine here. And I'm just going to measure from the top and we're fine. And I'm going to place a pin right across here. Same for the other side. Make sure that we're 4.5 inches. So that our straps are nice and straight. And I'm going to repeat this for the other side of our bag. And then again, I'm going to place a pin right here at the top just to make sure we're nice and straight. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to head back over to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch all the way up the stitching line of our handles about an inch or so above the handle, across and all the way back down to the bottom of our handle. And we're going to do that for all 4 sides of our handles here so that they are secure to our bag. So let's head over to the sewing machine and let's do that. Okay, I have now finished stitching up these handles, and I didn't show you this on the video because again it's just a straight stitch up, across, and back down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bag and I'm going to place these 2 pieces right sides together. And I want to make sure that my handles are lined up and all of my pockets are lined up. And I'm going to stitch along the bottom and along the sides using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to show you on the video. There's no reason. We're just going to stitch down the sides and across the bottom using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, if you're a beginner sewist, you're going to want to use some pins or some clips to keep these in place. If you're a more advanced sewist, you may not want to do that. It's completely up to you. But I'm just going to put a couple of clips there to keep this in place. So I'm going to go and stitch all the way from the top to the bottom, all the way around until we have our bag in shape. Okay, so now our bag is stitched together, but we want to box our corners now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a pen and a 2-inch square. Now you can cut this out of paper, out of cardboard, or you can have one of these little quilting squares. And I'm just going to make this into a 2-inch by 2-inch square, and I'm going to draw using my pen a 2-inch square on the corner, and I'm going to do this on the other side as well. And then I'm going to cut out those 2-inch squares because this is going to allow me to box my corners a lot easier than if I didn't cut out the 2-inch squares. So here we go. We're going to cut these out. Just like that. And now we've got this hole through all of the layers of our fabrics. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to match up our bottom seam with our side seam. Now we have a choice here. We can open up our seams like this, but I prefer to nest my seams and have one go one way and one go the other. It seems to work a lot better for me to match up the bottom seams. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip all along here. And I'm going to do the same exact thing on this side. And you can see when we close up our hole by matching our side seam and our bottom seam that we create a straight line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch a straight line using a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across here. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to move on to our next steps. Here we are at the sewing machine, and I have my corners clipped here. I'm just going to flatten out my bag and place my presser foot underneath here. And then I'm going to stitch all the way across this line using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to repeat this because this gets a lot of wear and tear when you're putting stuff in and out of your bag. So I'm just going to make another run at this. Now I'm going to do this on the other side. And that's all there is to it. So now we've boxed our corners, we are just going to turn our bag right sides out. Now this Pellon 809 or 808, whichever you decide to use, is a little stiff, which is why I prefer the fusible fleece. But it works nonetheless. And you can see that we have our outer bag complete, and it will stand up on its own. But we're not finished yet because we need to have a lining for our bag. We can't leave it like this with the raw edges. So what we're going to do is we are going to take our lining fabrics we are going to stitch all the way around using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to place these right sides together. However, on the bottom of our lining, we are going to leave an opening about this big because we're going to have to turn this bag right sides out. So I'm just going to run over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch this lining up the same exact way that we stitched up our bag by just stitching the sides and part way on the bottom so that we have this opening to turn our bag right sides out when we need to. So I'll be right back. Now I've stitched up my lining, and as you can see, I have left an opening here so that I will be able to turn my bag. And now I'm going to do the same thing that I did on my bag, is I'm going to draw a 2-inch square, and I'm going to cut these corners off and box the corners in exactly the same way that I did on the outer bag. Now we're just going to press our side seam to our bottom seam and clip exactly the same way we did on the outer bag. And we're going to do that on both sides. And then I'm just going to run over and I'm going to stitch right across this lining just the same way that we did on the outer bag. And I'm going to come back and we're going to finish up this bag in just a few minutes. Okay, so now I have boxed my corners of my lining, but now we have to put the lining and the outer bag together. You will notice that I've left the lining wrong sides out. We are going to take our outer bag and we are going to place it inside of our lining bag, and now they are right sides together. We're going to sandwich these straps inside there. We're going to match up these side seams. And again, I'm just going to nest these seams so that they are nice and aligned. But you could open them as well if you wanted to. But I'm not going to do that. Now for our next step, we are going to stitch all the way around the top of this bag using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's head over to the sewing machine and do that. Here we are back at the sewing machine, and I have taken off my table that goes along with my sewing machine. So now I have a free arm, which is going to make it a lot easier for me to stitch the top of this bag. I am just going to place the top of this bag right here, and I'm going to stitch all the way around using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's the top of our bag. Now we're going to head over and finish up our next step. Now we have finished up stitching our bag, and now we need to turn it right sides out. And we're going to do that by pulling it through that opening that we left in our lining. There's our bag and our lining, and you can see that we have our box corners nice and neat and tidy. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to stitch up our opening in our lining, and you can use your machine or you can use ladder stitch. It doesn't really matter because it's going to be stuffed inside the bag. I like to use ladder stitch, so I'm not going to show you that here on the video. There are loads of tutorials out there on how to do ladder stitch, but it takes a little bit of time, so I'm not going to show you how to do it here. What I am going to do is I'm going to stuff this lining in there. And I'm going to clip so that the lining and the outer bag seam are right along the top. And I'm just going to put a few clips here. And for the final step, I'm going to head back over to the sewing machine and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to switch out my bobbin to yellow because I don't want blue thread to show up on my top stitching on my yellow lining. And then I'm going to top stitch all the way around this lining, and that's going to secure the lining to the bag, and it's also going to give you a little more professional look. So let's head over to the sewing machine and let's take care of that. Okay, so here we are back at the sewing machine, and I've switched out my bobbin to yellow. And I'm back to my free arm. I'm going to start here at one of the seams, and I'm just going to top stitch this bag all the way around using my free arm. And that's it. As you can see, I have a yellow thread on my lining and blue thread on my outer bag. And that's it. We have finished our super simple beginner 6-pocket tote bag. How simple was that? It just doesn't get any easier than that for a bag making project. I really like this project. It is fun, functional, and something you can use every day. And it's a beginner project. A beginner sewing project that anyone with basic sewing skills can make in no time at all. You watched me make this from beginning to end, and it was simple. I hope you enjoyed this project today. I hope that you will subscribe to my channel. Give me a thumbs up for it, and ding those bells for notifications so that you can get more sewing and crafting videos here at So Very Crafty, and head over to www.soverycrafty.com for more sewing and crafting tutorials that you don't get on the YouTube channel. And I hope that you will join me for my next video. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but hopefully it'll be something fun. And if it is, I hope you'll join me, and I will see you all next time. Bye.